Welcome back to Beyond the School Gate. For those of you who are new around here, my name is Ruth, and this podcast aims to share the varied experiences of women in leadership, to talk about what we do beyond the school gate, the good, the bad, and the funny. I thought it would be good if I started this podcast series just telling you a little bit about myself so you can get a little bit of context to some of the stories that will come up in later podcasts. So I am the youngest of 5. I have 4 older brothers and I have a husband and 2 children. My daughter is 20 and my son is 12. We had our daughter Saffron when we were 18, and then we had our son Junaid when we were 26. So we were teenage parents, we were young parents, and I love it because now people look at Saffron and me and say, "Are you guys sisters?" And I kind of like it. She doesn't. She cringes, as you would imagine any 20-year-old would when people ask if her mum is her sister. But I love it, you know. Trying to think what else I can tell you about myself. I currently work, I've always pretty much worked within the charity sector. I think having a child young and knowing that I wanted to give back to the community. I wanted to work in a role that really made a difference to the lives of children, young people and families. So I've always pretty much worked in that space. I was born in the UK and I moved to Australia nearly 3 years ago now with my family. I grew up in South London, or South London, if you know what I mean. If you know, you know. Pretty much South London my whole life. Had a great childhood. Had some really good friends who I'm still super, super close to now. Had a pretty standard childhood, to be honest. I suppose mum and dad weren't together, so I grew up in the household with my mum, but my dad's always been in my life, and we saw him frequently, and we're super close. So yeah, pretty standard childhood. Went on holidays, family holidays, fights with my brother, all of that kind of stuff. And then Ahmed's my husband, we found out that we were pregnant when we were 17 years old. So as you can imagine, that kind of changed things and made us grow up pretty quickly. We had Saffron when we were 18. So I think between the ages of between falling pregnant and then having her, there was a lot of growing up that happened. We were both at college as well, and working part-time. So I think the forecast for our lives probably didn't have a positive outlook. If you look at statistics and you look at the community and you look at kind of the people that were around us that were in similar situations, we probably wasn't supposed to do well. So I kind of like to talk about us as like the outliers. We're very much the outliers, and we are, without blowing our own trumpet, we look at things quite differently. And I remember my mum passed away when I was 26. I'll talk about that in a separate podcast. And I was about, I think, maybe 4 or 6 weeks away from having my son, and she passed away unexpectedly. But I remember one of the things that she had said to me a few years back, before I was even pregnant with my second. She said, "One of the things that I really admire about you and Ahmed is because you've got an old soul." And I thought, is this woman trying to shade me? Is this woman calling me old? I said, "What do you mean?" And she said that we were the kind of couple that if we wouldn't throw something away if it was slightly damaged. We'd pull out the masking tape and we'd mask it together, we'd glue it together. We'd figure out a way of making sure that the thing was repaired, and to the most part repaired better than it was before it was broken, if that makes sense. So we've kind of always had an old soul, and we've always kind of had that mentality of communication and just openness and honestness. And I think that's probably why it's worked. Kind of 25 years later, we're still kind of, on this ship and making it work and stuff. So had Saffron, was in college, finished college, went to uni, the usual, like most of our peers were doing. Part-time job, went to uni. We went to Greenwich University, both of us together. We ended up actually being in the same class. So Ahmed had joined a different university and spent his first year there. But because I had Saffron, I went to uni part-time. So I was only in 3 days a week, and I did my degree across 4 years instead of 3 years, because I was working part-time. I had Saffron. So between that and uni, it was manageable. And I said, you know, I don't mind adding an extra year on the end if it means that I'm not away from my baby every day. Like, that's okay. But he did his course in 3 years. So it actually meant that the first year that he started his course, he was at another university, but he didn't like the course. So we ended up transferring to my university. And I'm sure people side-eyed us as well at the same time, like, you two always just trying to be together. But then, he ended up in my class. So we finished uni, and then we both got full-time jobs. Like, we were both working part-time in the sector. Both of our degrees are both in youth and community studies. So we both got jobs straight away in the sector. Both of us actually got jobs in the sector kind of halfway through the course, which was really good because we could kind of use them towards our placement and our placement hours as well as getting paid, which was awesome. And then, finished university, went into the grind, working full time. Then I went to work. At the time I was working at St John Ambulance, and I fell pregnant. We fell pregnant with our second child, and I decided that I just wanted something to do whilst I was on maternity leave. So I approached my manager at the time, Wendy, who's awesome, and she has agreed to come on the podcast. So please keep checking back, because I think the episode with her is really going to give you a bit of an insight into my experience of working at St John and how somebody genuinely can care about another person and want what's best for them and support them to become a woman in leadership, to support them to become a better version of themselves, to support them to reach their goals that they want to be, that they want to reach. And I think that I always refer to her as like a second mum, because not only did she mentor me in the workplace and support me in my career, she's been there through a lot of difficult times in my life, with my mum passing away and having my son, and then my son being diagnosed quite early in his life with specific medical conditions. So definitely when I thought of doing this podcast, she was one of the first people that I wanted to get on the podcast, because she has definitely contributed to who I am. She's I think a lot of people use the term in Australia, that's where I cut my teeth. And I'm like, I really like that. That's where I cut my teeth in regards to realising that I could do this, and I could be a woman in leadership, and I could work within the sector, and I can work my way up, and I can achieve these things. I think growing up where I grew up, South London, mainly council estates, you kind of looked around and you didn't really see people doing much, if that made sense, or what they were doing is different to the stuff that Ahmed and I do now. And I'm definitely not judging, because your circumstances can sometimes dictate the decisions that you make. And for the most part, people around me were working in some fashion. So there's no judgment there, it's just an observation. But she really taught me that the world was bigger than my council estate. She really taught me that the world was bigger than London. Like, I'd been outside of London before working at St John, but I hadn't been to, like, I don't know, Liverpool or Newcastle or Manchester. Like, I hadn't been around. I'd been to Swanage, which is in Dorset, which is where my family went every year on holiday. And then I think Ahmed and I had maybe been to Wales on holiday. And then Brighton and Margate, you know, those usual ones. But I hadn't really seen the UK. So she definitely helped open my eyes just to the world is your oyster. I spent 12 years working at St John Ambulance. I kind of went in as a youth worker, and I laugh about it now, because I say that I went in as a youth worker with a chip on my shoulder, thought I knew everything. I had been working on in Peckham, so pretty much on the streets of South London, wherever young people were is where I was. I held a caseload of 30 they would call intensive clients. So they were young people that were either homeless, in gangs, teenage parents, just basically those what they I think refer to in Australia is at the pointy end. I think that's the term we use here. But it's those really kind of hard to reach, hard to engage young people. So I kind of was used to that. Then went into like St. John, which at the time felt like a very white middle class organisation. And if I hadn't mentioned at the beginning, I'm mixed race. My dad's from Jamaica, my mum's English. So when I joined St. John, it was a very different world, if that makes sense. So I looked around and I was like, oh gosh, nobody looks like me. Nobody sounds like me. Is this place really for me? What do I do? And I think one of the things that Wendy taught me was that you can make the place for you. And that for me was massive. And it was that acknowledgement of this is different to what you were doing. And I think that acknowledgement of, yeah, you're pretty different to most people that work here. And so what? And so what? I was taken on the value that I brought to the organisation. And I just thought it was awesome. So I won't go too much into kind of the St. John side of stuff because I don't want to spoil the episode that's going to come up with Wendy on the channel. But that for me was the place that I worked, that I realised I can... I know that sounds so cheesy, but you can be what you want to be and you can keep pushing yourself. And the limit that you think is your limit, just push a little bit more and just see what happens. Just push a tiny bit more. Keep pushing. Build your social capital. Build networks with people. Talk to people that you wouldn't necessarily have the opportunity to in your day-to-day life. And I think that's one of the things through the podcast I'm really, really hoping comes through is that all the people I have on the podcast are so different. And most of them are people that I've worked with and have been influential in my career. And in normal life, outside of work, our paths never would have crossed because we are so different. But the fact that we've been able to unite over something, and that is about women in leadership, it is about women within business, there's something quite special about that. And I've been able to maintain friendships with people that on paper we probably wouldn't be friends, if that makes sense. Like if you saw them on paper and me on paper, you wouldn't be like, oh, that's a good match. You'd be like, oh yeah, no, probably not, probably wouldn't work. Probably be a lot of assumptions on both parts, a lot of thoughts on both sides about the other person. But I think that we've been able to bond and maintain those friendships, and I think there's something really, really special there. So that was my stint at St. John, and then we moved to Australia. We got our visas, and that was a job that I left in the UK. I'd worked from going in at 23 to as a youth worker with a chip on my shoulder to I'd managed to work my way up to becoming head of community engagement. So I had operational responsibility for all of the community services up and down the UK, and there was 14 of those, and then a budget of millions and millions of pounds. So I definitely had worked my way up the ladder across those 12 years, and I'd learnt so much. And Wendy was a huge part of mentoring me and coaching me and encouraging me and at times pushing me to the next level where I thought, oh, I don't know, just pushing me and reminding me, just try. And I loved that job. I think if our visas weren't granted to move to Australia, I reckon I probably still would have been working at St. John Ambulance, because I really made some real lifelong friends there. And then we moved here, and then I know I'm taking this more down the career path, but I think it's nice for you to almost get like a verbal CV so you can kind of know what my background is. And then, I moved to Australia, and then I worked for an organisation called Marathon Health. I joined there as the group manager for Headspace. So we had 7 Headspace centres. And the CEO, Megan, has also agreed. Some amazing women in my life, right? She's also agreed to be on the podcast. And I'm really interested in her sharing her story of becoming a woman in leadership, because she became CEO whilst I was working there. So when I joined, I think she was operations manager, and then she moved into another role, and then she won the CEO role. And I remember just watching from the sidelines kind of how that happened, and how she put herself forward for stuff, and how she said, I don't know these things, and she was open to learning and open to suggestions, and she was just so humble along the way. I remember just sitting from the sidelines, almost fangirling, being like, wow, that's pretty inspirational. Like, within, I think I was there for 18 months, and I think this all happened within 12 months. She'd gone into that position, and from what I hear, she's smashing it. So I'm really excited to have her on the podcast as well. And then I left Marathon and moved to where I'm working now. There was an opportunity that came up. One of the people that I managed at Marathon had left Headspace, and she had moved to manage a youth centre. And then she sent me a text message just saying, look at this job. And I thought to myself, I don't know. It's the next level up. It's executive manager. It's the next level up. Can I really do that? I remember thinking, surely they've got an internal candidate that they want, and they're just going through the motions of putting this role out, because it was a brand new role that didn't exist before. So I remember thinking, I don't know. And I thought to myself, do you know what? I'll just put my hat in the ring. If I don't get it, I don't get it. At least I've had the experience, hopefully, of being interviewed at an executive manager level. Even if I don't get the job, I've had that experience of knowing the type of questions that they ask. And then if I wasn't successful, I had loads of questions planned that I was going to ask around for feedback and why I didn't get it, where can I develop, how can I get myself ready for positions like this moving forward. So I went for the interview, and I had Camilla and Tracy on the panel. Camilla was the CEO at the time, and Tracy was the Director of Client Services. So I was going to be reporting into Tracy, and obviously Camilla was the CEO of the organisation. And I remember walking in, and there was something about Camilla that reminded me of Wendy. They do look alike a little bit, but there was just something about her spirit and her character that I felt at ease straight away. And I kind of knew Tracy because when I worked at Marathon, we had worked on a funding application together. So I kind of knew Tracy, if that made sense. And again, my spirit just took to her straight away. The whole crew, actually, because I think there was about 4 of them that came to the Marathon office when we were working on the tender together. And I remember just being like, these guys seem like fun to work with. They seem pretty cool. They know their stuff. It was a real good vibe. So yeah, when I walked in my interview, I just felt at ease straight away, and it felt so conversational, and it felt like I was just telling a friend over coffee who I hadn't seen for 20 years, what I'd spent the last 20 years doing in my career and what was going on in my life. And it felt so relaxed, so conversational. And I left there just thinking, I really hope I get that job. I don't know if I'm what they want, and there's a lot more people who probably have a lot more experience than I do, but I really hope I get the job. And I remember driving home thinking, I really hope they call me. And I had gone through an agent, so he had told me that I had my interview on the Monday, and then I think they were seeing the rest of the candidates on the Thursday or the Friday. So I remember just being like, I've literally got to wait till the end of the week. But I thought, do you know what is for you is for you. And at the very least, I've had the experience, and I've made connections there. Like, the sector in Canberra is so small. Everybody knows everybody. So the worst case scenario is I don't get the job. Best case scenario is I do get the job. But equally, if I didn't get it, I now knew Camilla a little bit more. I knew Tracy a little bit more. And it meant that I'd built my social capital, which Wendy always told me was super, super important. So I went into it like that. And then Ben texted me and said, can you talk? And I missed it because I was out on a run, and it was the Friday, I think, and I was like, oh no. And it was 5:00 by the time I got back and looked at my phone. And I thought, let me just text him back because he's probably finished up for the day. This is Canberra on a Friday, and no one's around at 5:00. Let's be honest. And I was like, oh, and I texted him back, and then he called me. And then I remember like my heart was beating so fast. I was like, oh, and then he was like, they want to offer you the job. And I was like, no way. And I remember looking at my Apple Watch, and it had spiked because it thought I was still doing an activity, because my heart was beating so fast. I was just so excited. So yeah, I've been there. Next month it will be a year. So October 2020 is when I started. So yeah, October 2021 will be a year. I've learned so much. I'm currently in an acting director client services position. We've had a little bit of a restructure and a bit of a joining forces with another organisation. So we've got a little bit of a temporary structure in place at the moment. And yeah, I'm acting director client services, which is awesome because it means I also get to work in the out of home care space, and I haven't had much exposure in that space. So I'm learning so much and I'm absolutely loving it. I really, really am. And again, I'm surrounded by some awesome women, just everybody just helping each other out. And there was a saying that I saw online that said, surround yourself with women that would mention your name in a room where there's opportunities and you're not there, or something along those lines. I've totally butchered that, but you get my gist. If you Google some quotes, it will come up. And that's genuinely what I feel. I feel like I'm surrounded by some really, really awesome women, and there's still so much for me to learn. I'm an unknown entity in a way in Canberra, as in when I got this role, I'd only been here 18 months. And the sector is so connected, and everybody knows everybody, and everybody tends to stick around in the sector for a long time. So the fact that I was an unknown entity, I was like, oh God, they might not offer me the job because they just don't know me, right? They don't know me. But they did, and I'm here, and I'm absolutely loving it, and I want to stay forever and ever and ever, and I will stay as long as they want me, and when my time is up, I will move on to another adventure and see where that takes me. So, yeah, I just wanted to come on and give you guys a little bit of an introduction into me, what my background was like, a little bit about what my childhood was like, some of the key milestones in my life around falling pregnant young, losing my mum relatively young. I was 26, pregnant with my second. So I just wanted to give you an update on some of those milestones, because I think it helped set the tone for some of the conversations that you're going to be hearing over the coming weeks and months. So I'm super excited, and I keep saying to Ahmed, I'm excited and I'm scared, and he keeps asking me why, and I said because Beyond the School Gate, the podcast, is the first thing I've ever done that's in this space on my own. We have a family YouTube channel, and my son has his own YouTube channel, and I do such varied stuff at work, and that's work, right? But I've never done anything like this, and this is like me going out on my own, doing this on my own, or as my son would say, by my own self. Like, that's scary. Like, I was saying to him, what if no one listens? What if no one tunes in? What if no one likes it? And he said, babe, I guarantee you'll have one listener, because I'll listen. So Ahmed, I appreciate you, and I appreciate your support. However, I hope there are a few other listeners that have joined us on this journey, and I'm really, really excited about putting out a few more podcasts. So I'm going to wrap up now. That's me pretty much in a nutshell, and I really, really look forward to sharing the upcoming podcasts with you in the weeks and months. See you later. Bye-bye for now.